In this teaching, I'm going to be going over the prerequisites that we have to adhere to before we execute any golden bullet setup. Now, when I was experimenting with the golden bullet and trying to refine it and trying to increase my win rate, the key difference maker for me was including the ICT confluences as part of my golden bullet entry strategy to really get to that consistently profitable status. Now, when I first started trading Goldback, I was kind of ignoring all other teaching I remembered from my ICT learning, and I was just focusing on those Goldback levels. But it's only once you include these ICT confluences do you take your golden bullet trading to the next level. Now, there are three mandatory ICT principles that we must adhere to before we execute that golden bullet. So the first one is the daily bias. We only ever execute trades if it aligns with our daily bias. Now, how do we formulate our daily bias? Our daily bias really comes from doing our analysis of the DXY on a higher time frame, and we are really trying to estimate whether next week's candle will close bullish or bearish. So using ICT principles on the higher time frame, we're trying to ascertain whether next week's candle will close bullish or bearish. Now, it's not enough to know, let's say, that next week we expect a bullish candle. We can't take longs every single day next week. We have to pick the days in which we want to trade to find those high probability bullish setups. So as you know, every candle, including the weekly candle, opens. It has the element of a Judas swing, which is the wick, and that Judas swing will be away from your intended weekly bias. So if we're bullish for next week, that Judas swing will typically be bearish, and it may have an element of consolidation. Once we've formed that low of the week, we then expand, and it's only after we think that low of the week is in place do we look for our longs. Once we think the high of the week has been put in place, we stop trading, because then we expect the retrace and the opposite wick of that candle to be created. Now, in short, the way we determine the low and high of the week is to marry our weekly bias with the economic calendar. And we're trying to sieve out where we think the low and high of the week will form based off of the high impact news events. Right, so I will do a longer teaching on this. But the answer to this question really comes from analyzing those weekly DXY bias videos that I produce. And so don't just watch the one that is pertinent to your next week's trading. Try to watch the history of them also, so you can start understanding for yourself how I formulate the daily bias and then the weekly bias. Now, so that's the first one. We only take golden bullet trades that align with our daily bias. Right, before we take any golden bullet trade, we have to have a sweep of liquidity. And that sweep of liquidity has to at least be an M5 sweep. Now, ICT himself recently said that his son's algorithm relies on a sweep of liquidity before he enters. And he also said higher time frame algorithms also have a slight retrace and a sweep. So we never take golden bullet setups unless there's been a sweep of liquidity. Now, the third mandatory requirement is there has to be a draw on liquidity in line with the golden bullet entry and the draw and the daily bias. Reason being, there is no point taking a golden bullet trade that aligns with your daily bias, but price does not have a reason to go there. So the draw on liquidity could be equal highs, equal lows. It could be prior day highs, prior day lows, session liquidity, H4 or H1 liquidity. But there has to be a reason for price to want to get there as part of the golden bullet algorithm. But of course, we don't necessarily TP at that draw on liquidity. We TP where the golden bullet is supposed to TP, and that's in a later teaching, but there has to be a draw on liquidity. So the three mandatory ICT confluences, once again, is we only take trades that align with our daily bias. We need a sweep of liquidity before we enter our golden bullet trade, and there has to be a logical draw on liquidity. Now, there are other confluences also, so we should be mindful of AMD. So we spoke about the weekly candle having an element of a Judas swing, accumulation, manipulation, distribution. So typically I don't trade Mondays because that's would be the accumulation, and I don't trade Fridays because that's usually the other side of the wick, which is the consolidation. I trade London open kill zone primarily. So I am always looking at Asia, the session prior to London, to understand what did Asia do and what was its role in AMD. Ideally, I'm looking for Asia to be the accumulation or the consolidation, because then it's likely that London will manipulate and distribute, giving us enough volatility for us to TP our golden bullet. However, if Asia has already expanded, I will not trade London because London will probably consolidate, and I would look to trade New York. You can use the same logic if you trade New York. You just have a look at London. If London has expanded massively, then maybe your New York session will consolidate. So bear that in mind. Trading is really about filtering away and removing and reducing as many losing and low probability trades as you can, so that your winners, instead of getting you out of drawdown, they are growing your account. Now, there are three indicators I also like for additional confluence. One is the ICT Everything indicator. And this indicator allows you to project the high or low of the day using standard deviations of the CBDR, Asia range, and the flout. Now, it's just handy to know where a potential high or low of the day could occur, because that may tell you where the Judas swing is. So if you see a golden bullet entry at what may be the low of the day, according to the ICT Everything indicator, that is fantastic confluence. I also use DMN's ICT toolkit to be aware of the average daily range. Reason being, let's say EU on average moves 80 pips a day. If price has already moved 85 pips and I see a golden bullet entry that requires me to get to, let's say, 95 pips to TP, I will not take that, because price is already extended and has exceeded its average daily range. So it's less probable that it will push further for me to TP. Knowing the average daily range is usually more important for New York traders. However, London traders should be aware of it also, just in case Asia did a big move. The final indicator that I really love using for extra ICT confluence is the ICT macros indicator. Now, this indicator paints on your charts the 20-minute windows, which ICT spoke about. And during these 20-minute windows, a macro may run, which will move price in order to address an imbalance or sweep liquidity. Now, if you're aware of these timings and you start taking golden bullet trades and you see a golden bullet aligning with one of these macro windows, that is great confluence. And as you become more aware of these windows and you see more golden bullet executions aligning with these windows, you have a greater confidence in taking the trade. So 3 indicators that may help you with your trading. The ones I use more heavily are the ADR. I'm always aware of where we are in terms of the daily range. I know the macro timings now, so I might not necessarily use the indicator. And I like being aware of the high of the day or the low of the day projections. But the key thing about this teaching is we do not take any trades unless it aligns with our daily bias, there's been a sweep of liquidity, and the golden bullet entry will move towards a logical drawn liquidity.